Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. P, Dr. Wayne Purnell. It is an amazing journey. I'm the Breakthrough Success Coach, and I have a wonderful woman with me today. Joining me today is Jill Strickland-Brown. She has an amazing story that I am just going to ask her to share almost start to finish. I met Jill at what was called a curated conversation dinner a few months back. And in talking with her, I just felt like, wow, there's so much that I want her to share. Now, a lot of her journey comes from her work in the fashion industry. And this is what's fascinating, is that there's so many analogies that can be brought from the fashion industry to a whole life, right? Yeah. So Jill, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for your valuable time. And I'm really excited to be on. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm grateful.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. You're gonna offer some insights to our audience. You set down a path of creating basically very early on, and you knew that there were ways of kind of bringing forth who you are through honoring both shape and drape, right?
Oh, I like that. That's
yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. That's really good.
Well,
I like it. I might use that. That was really insightful. And I'm like, you're a guy too, and you totally get it. Yes.
I do get it. Your book is called Behind the Button, and it goes into that a little bit. Can you talk about your journey, recognizing that like you didn't start out owning a fashion store. You didn't start out really enhancing women's looks. You started kind of where a lot of people start, which is, almost at the bottom, basically. It's like,
absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So talk a little bit about that journey. Let's start with, how did you know? I mean, you went to college where?
I did not go to college. In my house, financially, it wasn't an option for me. So, I think I had a hustle in my brain. I thought maybe I wasn't enough because I didn't have that piece of paper. I didn't have what everyone else had. But what I did have was drive. And I thought I had to hustle a little more because I didn't have that piece of paper. And what I realized is what it gave me was much more of an education, because I was curious, just like you're curious, George. I was curious, and I just took a chance on so many things. And one thing led to another, and led to another. So you're right. It's a journey, and it's still a journey, writing the book and meeting the people, and it's amazing.
So before we jump to the writing, right? There's
it's one big thread. It's one big thread. Yeah.
In the fashion industry, it's all one thread. So I mean, here's the thing: is that it is a journey, and it is one thing that leads to another and to another. And what I want to do is to back up and say, well, okay, it did, like, the first thing that it led to was what? Before you answer that, one of the things I like to do on this podcast is to call out some of the lessons along the way. And already just in your first answer, you talked about, I prompted you by saying, where'd you go to college?
Yeah.
As if that's a thing that everybody does. And you said, well, I didn't, which is fabulous. And what you did with that was to say, I felt like I wasn't enough.
Yep.
And
a lot of women feel like that. And that's definitely been the mission of my life, is helping women say you are enough, and you are beautiful, and you're beautiful inside and out. And this is what we say. So that is the mission, is, being a kid. So you're saying, start at the beginning. The beginning was being a kid. And it's always the start, but my family of origin, I definitely did not feel enough. And there were factors in that I was in a fundamental religion. And if you followed the rules, you're in. If you didn't follow the rules, you were out. So early on, I said, okay, I want a different path. And I took that different path. And that's amazing.
It is amazing. So
Yeah.
from not enough to saying, oh, darn it, you know what? I am. And you made that a declaration.
Yeah, that took me 50 years to get there. I'm 55. And it took me a long journey, but it's been an amazing journey. And I'm so grateful.
Yes, this is huge. And that is one of the huge lessons, is that sometimes you have to tell yourself that and tell yourself that and tell yourself that until you believe it. And it's like, I have the drive, I have the curiosity. Mm-hmm. That's what's going to get me through. And darn it, somewhere deep inside, I must be enough. A lot of people use well, I'm not enough, that's why I'm driven. And mm-hmm. I just really want to turn that into a lesson right now for our entire audience, which is, you are enough right now. Mm-hmm. And you can let that drive you versus not enough. Oh, well, then what makes me enough? You're not filling in anything that's empty. You're already whole. And mm-hmm. to really give that gift to our listeners and our viewing audience, that you're already whole. And a diploma doesn't make you whole. Even the love of a parent or the acknowledgement of a parent doesn't make you whole, that you're already whole. And so, you broke away from the mold. You were essentially out tribe, like there's this in tribe and out tribe, and you chose not to go along to get along.
Exactly.
That is so powerful. It's just so powerful. So you began work. I know this about you. You began work when you were 14 years old.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and then how that work led you to it was almost this cascade of events that led you to the fashion industry.
Yeah.
And so, without saying, well, and then one thing led to another, get as specific as you can with, well, this event happened and this event happened, and that's what opened the door for me for fashion. And then I found myself working. You were doing. I mean, I want you to tell your story. So
sure, sounds good. So actually, the reason why I worked at 14 is I wanted clothes. So this fashion thing goes way back. So my parents didn't feel the importance of clothing, or, we didn't have a lot of money. So we got a lot of bags of clothing from our congregation. I wanted fashionable clothes. So I said, well, if I want something, I got to work for it. So I worked when I was 14, and I worked all the way up through high school. And then I worked for my brother, who had a copier company. And we had this big old clunky copier that at the time, which sounds ridiculous now, but when you put it in photographic paper, it made a photograph. So I thought, how am I going to sell this copier? It's expensive, but it makes this picture. So I went to a local modeling agency and I said, well, she needs a lot of pictures because she's in a modeling agency. And so I went in and I talked to her all about how she would need, kind of put myself in people's shoes. That's what I learned early on when I knocked on doors. You had to put yourself in those person's shoes so that you could communicate with them. And then, so I said, okay, she needs pictures and she owns a modeling agency. And she said, I don't want your copier, but you fit in here. And I think you would be fantastic. So she gave me a sales job. And I worked my way up to assistant director. And that is really how I entered the fashion industry. And then I liked that
job. Just pause for a second. Because here's the thing. It's like, yes. I went to sell a copier.
Yep.
Trying to understand what the other person needed. That makes you a great salesperson. They said, don't need the copier, but we need you.
Yep.
You started as a what?
Just a salesperson. Like,
okay.
People would, young girls would come in, and this is important too. Young girls would come in, and my job was to sell them a program that would help them get work. So my challenge, if I can go on, is that's where the whole body image thing actually started.
Yes.
Where I would have to tell a 15-year-old girl that she needed to lose weight to get jobs. And this was an absolutely normal, healthy girl that I knew in the modeling industry. She needed to lose weight. And if she did all this, it didn't matter because only 5% of models actually make it. And that did not sit well with me. And there was no diversity. And it did not accept people who had a real body shape. Now, 20 years later, 30 years later, that's all in vogue. But it wasn't at that time. And that's why I left the industry. I said, it didn't speak to my soul because we are all God's children. And, you got to love your body and who you are. So that started pretty young. And that, I think, started the journey of where I am today.
I think that's huge because a lot of people would have been sucked into the industry and they would have said, this is what I've been after. This is high fashion. This is what's going to make me a lot of money. I might even get my big break. You were working your way from sales up to an executive level position. And all the while you were fighting against an inner value.
Yep.
And you were like, and that's been a repetitive theme for you. Absolutely. In your life, where it's like, hey, I don't agree with the way I was raised. I don't agree with the company that I've ended up like working my way through. And I've got to do something different. And I mean, at that time that you were doing this, the models were,
very unrealistic. Yeah.
Unrealistically unhealthy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Unrealistic body shapes. And now, is that what led you then to say, well, I'm going to start my own?
Well, I took another journey, and I was bartending at the time, and I was making good money at night. But I was bored during the day. So I went to a boutique, which I, still always love fashion. And I said, I want to work here. And so I started talking to the owner, and she said, well, I don't need anyone in the boutique, but my sons own a manufacturing company in Plumsteadville, and they need someone to answer the phone. And I was like, I can answer the phone like nobody's business. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew they needed someone to answer the phone. And I will say that was a really fundamental foundation job where I learned everything: the dye bath, cutting, cost, sewing, and then it led me to a sales position. Always did. Always been a good salesman, So, but not selling anyone anything, but just putting myself in that person's shoes and fulfilling a need. You don't sell anyone anything. You just fix a problem.
Yeah, solving somebody's problem is the best when you're because then the solution sells itself.
Correct.
So it takes being a great listener. It takes really understanding and choosing to understand. In the manufacturing company that you ended up answering the phone for and learning the business, you talked about the dye bath.
Oh, the dye bath. It's
so please just you have an affinity for the love-hate almost of the dye bath, because the dye bath changes the fabric.
You got it. So it's all about transformation. And I think that's a theme, of transformation. So what happens is when you put fabric in scalding hot water of the dye bath, it changes the fibers, and it not only changes the color, but it changes the structure of the fibers as well. And you have to start with stronger fabric so it can endure that dye bath. And I equate that to life. Women, we go in and we have all our struggles and we have, we live life. But then when you come out, you emerge more beautiful, like the fabric, with lines and stretch marks of a life well lived. So yes, there are so many parallels. And I guess my filter in life has always been fashion. So that's how I equate life, through the filter of fashion, for sure.
Amazing. So yeah, changing the fibers to make them stronger is huge. Plus you add a little color, which is also huge.
Yeah.
This is great. The path you took from there, how did you know you wanted to start your own? You have your own boutique in Pennsylvania, is that right?
Yep. Well,
and it's called
Frox.
Frox. Frox.
Yep.
Yes.
So before I got to the boutique, when I worked for the manufacturer that taught me all about the dye bath, what happened is I was sitting at my desk answering the phone, and my bosses were in New York at a trade show, and the sweaters that they needed to sell weren't ready for the trade show. So they said, "Hey, can you come to New York and bring up those samples?" And I'm like, "Okay, I've never been to New York, but I can figure this out." So I went to the dye house. I picked up the sweaters. I threw them in a hockey bag. I got on a bus. And I got to New York, and I figured out they were at the Javits Center, and I went to the Javits Center, and they're like, "Well, you're here, so you're an extra set of hands. So there's a girl selling sweaters, so stand behind her. And when she shows the customer the sweaters and throws them on the floor, your job is to pick them up and put them back on the shelf." I was like, "Okay, I can do this." And then I listened to her presentation. I was like, "I can do this. I've been doing this my whole life." And so I started selling, and my boss was like, "Wow, you're really good at this. You're really good at sales." And it seems to be a theme. And he said, "We have the Mid-Atlantic territory open." So I started traveling Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, DC, Maryland. And I became a multi-million-dollar rep. And so that was great. And I did that for a long time. And then 9/11 happened. And I really had no desire. I had two small children, and I just did not want to be in New York anymore. So I opened my own boutique, and I said, if something happens to the world, and it's funny, 9/11 doesn't compare now to COVID, but I said, if something happens to the world, I can, shut the door and be with my children. I said, I want to open a store a block from my house. And I opened a store a block from my house. So, yeah. And then, in my boutique, the transformation continued.
Amazing. So good. Do you want to talk about your book a little bit?
Sure. The book is really a memoir. So we started out, we tell stories. What we do in the fitting room is, yes, of course, we fit them and drape and teaching them about their body shape. But then when they become vulnerable, or they trust me because they are vulnerable, we start sharing stories. We share stories about, our struggles. We share stories of things that connect. So for me, it's not just about fashion. I always feel the clothing is a connector. So when they started to share those stories, I said, my byline to the book is called The Stories That Thread Us Together. So of course I have to tell my story first. And then this is a series of books. So book number 2, and that will be the podcast, and that will be book 2, is telling the story of all the other women that I've encountered in my journey. And I'm sorry that leaves you out, Dr. P, for a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do men next time. And then the third book I already have in my head is I want to, because through the years, I've mentored a lot of young girls that come in and say, my whole life I wanted to work here, because my business is 20 years old. I'm like, oh my God, that makes me so old, but my business is old as a person. But anyway, I want to help young women, teach them at 20 what I learned at 50. So book 3 is going to be all the young, empowered women, girls that I've met as well. And actually, at my first book signing, I met a girl that's 15 and owns her own business of friendship bracelets that she sells for causes, because there was a shooting in our high school. So she raised $100,000 for the victims of the gun shooting. And now people in our town, all over, bring their calls to her, and she makes special bracelets for them and helps them raise money. And she's actually also spoken in front of the UN. So she's going to be one of my guests on the podcast for sure.
Fantastic. Good for
Yeah,
you.
amazing.
What's the name of your podcast? What's it called?
It's called Behind the Button. What happens
like
behind
the name
the
of your book? Just like
yes.
that.
Yeah, because my logo in the store is a button. So it's not fashion. It is what happens behind the button in our store, not just fashion. And also the history of a button is it's a connector, because before the button was invented, we draped clothes. But with the button, it was the first time we could tailor clothes. So the button, it's also what happens behind the button, but it's also a connector.
That's amazing. Awesome. The button is a connector, and yes. Sometimes you have to inhale hard just to make that button work. But
right? And we work on that too. But you know what? Accept your body the way it is. Yeah, get a bigger size, and it doesn't matter because no one sees the tag.
That's so good, right? One of the lessons that I hope people get is that you dress the body you're in.
I say that all the time. Yes. And that's why you and I connected, because when I started listening to your message, very similar to my message. And I think that's why you and I connected as well.
Indeed. It's about who are you and who do you choose to be, and not punishing yourself for who someone else says you're supposed to be. And I think that's really huge, that as you listen to this, as you watch this, that as as one of our audience members, that you're thinking about what is your life, and you can be both happy and dissatisfied at the same time, right? If you look at your life, you're listening to this, that means it's going okay. You're listening on something, right? So there are good things in your life. And you can also say, and I want more. I want it to be slightly different.
Well, I do 2 things. So I want to say yes, and I don't want to say but, because I learned that from you. When things aren't going well, I look at the little things. I say, aren't you lucky? Aren't you lucky? So if I'm in traffic and I'm frustrated, I say, aren't you lucky you have a car? Aren't you lucky you have gas? Aren't you lucky? When I'm in my house, I'm frustrated. I'm like, aren't you lucky you have running water and you don't have to put a pot on your head and go 10 miles to go get that water? Aren't you lucky you have your own business? Aren't you lucky you get to live in your passion? And every day, and even at nighttime, I write in a grateful journal. And it's really good. If you write in your grateful journal throughout the day, you look at what you're grateful for, because you have to write in that journal every night. And then I look back. I like looking back and seeing how far I've come. Again, because that journey, I didn't really think about what I was doing. And now I read the book and I'm like, I guess I did accomplish a lot, but I just kept on going, and I'm so grateful for everything I have.
It's so important to have a gratitude journal. It's so important to really acknowledge that. Aren't you fortunate? Aren't you lucky? Aren't you in a really great place? Mm-hmm. I did a blog post about the small stuff, like an aglet, right? The little plastic piece at the end of a shoelace that holds your shoelace, keeps it from being frayed. And if you can
someone invented that, yeah.
Right. And if someone invented that, and if you can say, wow, I'm really grateful for an aglet, then the big stuff is really profound in your life. And so, aren't you lucky that you have a car to be stuck in traffic, right? So really good. Awesome. I love the idea of honoring a shape, choosing to drape in a way that is flattering to the shape, and then choosing to tailor based on that as well. Behind the button is a vulnerable place, right? Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a story. And I think this is important because I think even men have body issues to deal with. There's a big supposed to out there about shape and about, well, you don't want the dad bod, or you need the six pack, or you need the, it's like your shape is your shape. And you can, again, you dress the body you're in while you're working on, or while you're choosing to either work on or not work on getting a different body.
Yeah. And they don't have to. I say the same thing you say, dress the body you are today. And if that makes, and you're not comfortable in your body, that's fine. If you're doing it for health or your comfort, but not because of this idea of what you should be. And actually, it's really funny that you mentioned men. More men have come to me and said, why can't I be in your book? And I do work with women, but it applies to men as well. And I do equate, even in the dye bath, is, you're working on yourself and, trying to be grateful and realize all your struggles. But what's really cool is when you're vulnerable, when you share your stories, you realize that your friends and your family are right next to you in the dye bath as well. So
it's so true.
Yeah.
It is so true. Let me ask you this. What else? Like there are things in your life. What else would you hope I would have asked you by now for this podcast?
Oh, tricky question. I thought you were pretty thorough. Wow, you stumped me. Yeah, you're worse than Oprah. I don't know.
I don't know if I've ever been compared to Oprah before. That's the one.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that is good. Usually that's absolutely right. Usually it's, what got you here.
Yeah.
And that's a great place to go. So what are you working on? I know that you've got a couple more books in the works. I know that you have 7 in mind. So that's fabulous.
My publisher's like, you got a lot in you. You got 7 books in you. It was really cool. I was at a place where I was speaking, and they were these directors of Mary Kay. And it was a huge room of these really empowered people, because Mary Kay, really made this opportunity for women. That's why she started the whole company. And they asked me to pick a picture that spoke to me. And the picture that spoke to me was really interesting. It was someone on a motorcycle, and they're going down a path, and you really couldn't see where the path goes. And then the rear view mirrors were very small, and they were blurred. So for me, that equated to where I am now. So I don't know. I've been in fashion my whole life. So being an author and possibly speaking and possibly working on a TED Talk, I don't know. This is a whole new world for me, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to get on that motorcycle and I'm going to go down that path, and we'll see where it takes me.
Curiosity and drive. Right? Like, I know something's there. I'm going to find it. That's awesome. Or I'm going to create it.
You got
really
it.
Great. Really great. Fantastic. Are there any lessons that you think we should highlight? Any further lessons that we haven't talked about?
Really, it's about transformation, which is, yes, body shape, but also the power of fashion, I think, is really important, where you make a woman feel great so she can go out and impact the world. She has the confidence where she can fake it till she becomes it. And I don't like fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. So become that person you want to be. And the clothing is the start.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Awesome. Here's a question. Right. I'm holding up the book. It's called Behind the Button. It is Jill Strickland-Brown. I will have a link in the show notes. if people want to reach you, how could they reach you?
Okay. JillStricklandBrown.com. And the website is in the works. So, give me a little grace, ladies, but it's good. We're working on it. But JillStricklandBrown.com. And it does have a link to Frox. So if you want to shop or you want to have my image transformation coaching, we can do that virtually as well. So, yeah.
That's perfect, right? That's the whole thing. Frox is Frox. And you can shop virtually. And if you want coaching from Jill on body image and self-confidence, you're going to find her. Yeah, you're going to find her at Jill Strickland-Brown. This is a beautiful kind of wrap. I love this. We covered so much in a relatively short time. And I so appreciate you and the journey you've been on and the inspiration. That there's so much more to you. You've got so many more stories. So I really, I wish you all the best on this journey. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for.
Thank
go ahead.
You. And I just want to thank you as well, because I know you've New York Times bestseller and you've really very accomplished, but yet you reached out to me and allowed me this opportunity. And so I look forward to seeing where our paths cross again.
Oh, they'll definitely cross again. Definitely cross again. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Okay. This is One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. My guest, Jill Strickland-Brown. I am Dr. P, Dr. Wayne Purnell, your breakthrough success coach. We'll see you here next time.